Well, thank you all for showing up today. Such a beautiful day. You could have done a million other things rather than come here. So I'm pretty grateful that all you showed up. I worked on the Wolfeboro Central Division for about 9 months. And as one of our other alumni here, a couple of them are here, would say it's almost too good to be true. The stuff that we could do, and maybe I should say the stuff we got away with, you couldn't do it nowadays. Shouldn't have done it in those days either. But what I've got about 131 images of some of our antics and some of our stuff, and it's just I'm just going to scratch the surface really, but there's a little bit of everything. I've got some stories, bear with me because some of them might be a little monotonous or a little bit long, but it helps to illustrate what we were doing there. Now, the Central Division was actually formed first took over the branch in February 6th of 1976, but the rehab of the track started in the fall of 1975. Now, Alan Thomas was able to get some pictures of the engine that came off the East Branch in Lincoln, the paper mill in Lincoln, and they used it to do some of the repair work on Ashland Hill where there were some washouts. Now, I've got some pictures of Alan's that came off the internet, probably came off of Facebook. So if any of you see any of your pictures on here, just be assured that they're here because you have really good taste in photography. And hopefully you won't be too angry at me for using them to illustrate this. Some of the pictures I took, but I couldn't take a lot of pictures because I was working. But I tried to, if something unusual happened, I tried to have it. But what we have here at the beginning is the East Branch and Lincoln engine by the Robin's Nest up here in, I think it's Thornton area. This is going past the plant at Beebe River. Notice the old swayback homemade boxcar that was done on logging bunks. Wonderful little piece of equipment. And I think that's Alan's car. Looks like about a 61 Chevy at Blair Bridge. And they had 2 flat cars and a motor car that they had on there. Just the fact that somebody got pictures of this is pretty amazing. If I had known about it, I would have had pictures of it too. And this was one of the main reasons why they needed that, is to blow the mulch on the areas that they repaired, the washouts that were repaired. Pretty hard to access any of that by truck. So flat car, 45 tonner, yeah, that works for me. This was the, I think it was the 1953 International. It had the nickname of the Yellow Peril, and for good reason. Billy Remington, who was running it one day, came around the curve by Livermore Falls. One of the high rail wheels fell off, and it was heading towards the chasm there at Livermore Falls. And I saw the grooves in the right-of-way after that happened, and it was a pretty close call for Billy. But that was the Yellow Peril. The last we knew, I think Sam Langley had it. I don't know whatever happened to it now, but it had more lives than a cat, that thing. And this is what things looked like after it had been repaired. This was taken from the tail end of a passenger train, probably one of the springtime excursions in 1976. Now, before the Wolfeboro got that engine from the Maine Central, they painted out the numbers and all the Maine Central markings. They put 101 in the number boards, and they just put WLFB 101 on the cab. Pretty basic, but it was enough to get it here. And but here's the official, the bulletin notice of changing this over to the Wolfeboro Central Division. And you can rest assured the Boston and Maine was really happy to get rid of this particular line. 72 miles of not much of any traffic. That popping sound you heard was probably the champagne at 150 Causeway Street. Now, they didn't waste much time. This picture was taken by Gary Webster at Tilton, and this was taken February 6th. Light engine run down to Concord to pick up cars. And he also got them at Sargent Street down there in Northfield. Now I'm going to turn this part over to Dane Malcolm. Come on up, Dane. They had a little altercation, shall we say, and Dane can probably say it best. There you go.
Thank you, my dear man. I'm really a lover, not a fighter, I'm sorry. I'm really glad to see all of you.
Hold it like an ice cream cone.
Okay. I'm glad to see all of you, and glad that I could be here to describe this little incident. My family was in the railroad. My great uncle was George Crowley. He was an engineer in the steam days. He ran the Northern, it was 3713, and the notable locomotives. He ran the butt cars towards the end of the butt cars. Harry Crowley from Concord was my uncle. He signed on being in the brakeman, as a track band in 1952. I have his manual he had to do to get hired. And then Fred Crowley, who was my mother's cousin, I call him my cousin. He was on the B&M during the steam days, and his first job was fireman on steam. And he got to fire the last Boston and Maine steam passenger train, which was from Clinton to Boston. That was it.
We have two microphones, it's okay.
Are you with the police?
No. It's okay.
So Fred Crowley was on the train. When I pulled into North Station, WBZ was there, and being one of my family members with the wit. So that he goes, sir, how much coal did you use on this line? And he says, well, what was that song? I loaded, what was it, 40? You load 16 tons. So that's all he could think of was that song. And he said, well, I used up about 16 tons. So it was, anyway, Fred Crowley, I guess it was so far back, I think Fred Crowley got me sort of hooked up with the Boston and Maine and Concord crews. And I rode this line with Carl Boyce, engineer. He was #1 on the system. Sam Gilman was the fireman a lot. I've been back and forth on this line and filmed them a lot. And all those people are gone. All my photos are really a tribute to we'll call them the real Boston and Maine railroaders that were here. So I should get back to my job now. My other job is to be over here. So. Okay, so I went up to Lakeport to the Roundhouse, and Jim Moore happened to be there. 101 was sitting out front of the lake house, Roundhouse there. He says, you want to go to Lincoln? I says, yeah, thank you. So I climbed aboard. We were going short hood forward, so I'm actually on the right side here, going north. And Jim was on the left side, running the engine. So it was pretty, very scenic, of course, as you go north. And all was going well till we get, as we were coming up to the Jack-o'-lantern, it's the golf course, Jack-o'-lantern, we noticed there was some New Hampshire Electric Co-op trucks on the side of the road. They were doing some work on wires. And they all waved, he blew the horn. We didn't know that they also were doing construction in the middle of the golf course, there was a dirt road that went up over the track. And we didn't know it, but there was a crew working there. And they had a backhoe, which as it climbed up over the dirt road on the track, it got jammed sideways. They couldn't budge it, so they backed in a panel truck down the track, hooked a chain to it. That didn't do anything. Then they got a chain to a tree, and they had a guy with a come-along. They're trying to triangulate that. That didn't work. So they backed the pole truck, the big truck with a bucket on it, with the pole, you know, the bucket was low. They backed in and hooked a chain to this poor little backhoe again. So it was very much a cluster. And so I was going along. This was my view, and we were coming around a corner. So I was blind, and I couldn't see the track. But all of a sudden, I heard the air dumping. I just, and I look over, and Jimmy had put it in an emergency, and he just got up on the horn, and he just froze. He just was holding it down. And as we swung, and I came into view, and I see something coming at us. So I did this. I ducked down and got as low as I could. All of a sudden, it was boom, a rock, back, boom, like that, and then crash. And I felt the glass coming down my neck. And we came to a stop. Of course, the alarm bell is going off for the circuitry, and it's just a massive confusion. And I look, and there was red fluid started trickling down here, and I said, "Oh my God! I hope we didn't hit somebody." But it was the fluid from the hydraulics on the truck. So the only way to get out of there, that's where I was, right up by that bucket. So the only way to get down, I climbed down, and we had to climb down, and we're on a trestle. Look at this, boy, you're like my shadow man. So I had to climb down, get on the trestle, and then go like this, holding on to the side of the engine to get to the back, back into the clear. And when I got back there's nobody in sight. But there's a sort of, geez, what I'm saying? And all of a sudden, out of the woods, guys are starting to come out. Oh, geez. All of a sudden, we've got all these, a cluster of people celebrating that we're all alive and well, and that was quite a thing. And of course, the state police showed up, and he said, "What's your job?" I said, "I'm in training." So they had to do some paperwork. So anyway, you can see how we moved that little backhoe over. What happened when we hit the truck, that truck had a anvil bolted onto the back bumper. So when we came into that, we actually coupled with that truck. And that's why we took it over the trestle with us, because that was part of the train. Quite unusual. Another one. This truck was up here. This was the first thing that we hit, and that just went up in the air and just came down flat caked on over there.
But look, the light still works.
That's not good with gasoline dripping out, but anyway. So yeah, it was quite a scene. So I took quite a few pictures. I just used the roll-up just without even thinking about it. So this is looking back. There's the beginning of the trestle right in there. And I just, what can I say? To experience something like that was quite a thing. Any more? How many more we got? Yeah, that shows looking back from inside the engine, looking back at the truck. That's a good view of the, we were on that trestle. And like I say, he's hooked in on, he's hooked into the engine there. I believe that's a policeman there. And there was some guy, he had like a 1930s one with big wide gentleman hats they used to wear, and he had an old, he had a coat, like a long coat on, and a cigar in his mouth. And he comes up over the bend, and I said, my God, is this the ghost of 1939 coming back to check out this? It's like, where did this guy come from? How did he materialize out in the middle of the woods? It was quite a thing. He was a real person, he wasn't a ghost.
That was the last of them.
So I'm finished. That's all for me.
I will say he's done now.
Jim Moore was some. Oh, wait a minute. There was just a little.
How fast was Jimmy Moore running?
He was making a nice hum. Very nice hum. Comfortable. Wah, just a nice hum. He's such a Yankee. He was so dedicated. We got this mess cleaned up in about an hour. Then we had to go to Lincoln. And I did have another picture. I just
Hold your microphone up close.
you can't
Like an ice cream cone.
you can't hear me from there.
I can hear you, but they can't.
All right. So anyway, we went up to Lincoln, and there was snow, and I did have a picture of him. But by God, we go up to Lincoln anyway. I guess we dropped that boxcar off. We come back here to Plymouth, and there was a boxcar that had rusted in out here. I don't know how many years it had been there. This is like about 9 o'clock at night after all of this commotion we went on through. He's in there. I'm going to try to get that boxcar out of there. So he's like, bang, he's trying to pull this boxcar up and down this siding, it's just sliding. It's not going to break loose. So finally, okay, Jim, you can't do it. Let's go. He gets me back down to Lakeport. I go to a payphone. I call my wife. It's about 10 o'clock at night, and I said, "Hi, I just was in a train wreck, but don't worry, I'm okay. Can you pick me up?" And she says, "No, I'm in bed. Get a hotel room." It was a nice hotel, a nice hotel room in downtown Laconia, but no sympathy, no sympathy. Anyway. I guess it's time for me to leave now. Would you like your...
My turn, yeah.
When I was your age, we didn't do this. We just yelled.
Okay, it's my turn again.
Hey, Bruce.
Yeah.
The clouds down at Union, New Hampshire. Just want to
Yes. Yep. Yep, that's right. My favorite flavor. Electronic. Now that was
Dane has a very nice Facebook group set up, and he has very nice pictures. Message him if you see something you like, okay?
Try it again.
Dane has a very nice Facebook group, and all his pictures are set up there. If you see something you like, please message him. He'll get back to you.
Well, February of 1976 was not a real good month for the Wolfeboro Railroad. After hitting those vehicles up there in Thornton, within a week, they derailed the plow at Neal Shores Road in Meredith. They hit some ice, and out they went. Edwin Garrett was in the plow along with Cecil Knight. And once Edwin got out, he said that never again, no way am I ever going to ride in that plow. And as far as I know, he never did after that. And I don't blame him. I plowed snow with it. And it's a little disconcerting when you hit a snowdrift. You can feel the whole thing just kind of shudder. At the time we were using it, the plow was 75 years old, and it was tired, I guess is the best way to put it. But it's still in existence. It's over in Union, New Hampshire at the Union Depot over there. And you can go over and take a look at it. And just remember, this is what it looked like after a little altercation with ice. Now this is what it looked like. I think this is an Alan Thomas photo. It's kind of heading over the bank. And that's what it looks like. It took care of that corner of the plow, and it also did quite a bit of damage to the end of the locomotive. It knocked out headlights and took care of a bunch of other appurtenances. And the worst part about this was, this line being opened up and plowed in anticipation of running a passenger train the next day for the governor and a bunch of other big shots. So they had to make some arrangements pretty quickly to get a B&M engine, and I'll show you what they did. This is what it looks like with the end gone. It got restored. So the next day, the long hood end was unscathed, headlight worked and everything. So they went to Concord, just like this. And this is a Gary Webster shot. And they picked up a B&M engine. So now they got an engine on each end. They don't need to run around the train, and everything is working. The 101 was not compliant with any laws anywheres, but that didn't stop the Wolfeboro Railroad. This shot was probably an Alan Thomas shot at Winnisquam, and again at Laconia. And Weirs Beach, and you see the 101 on the far end. And in the handout, if any of, not everybody got a handout, there's one left. If anybody would like one, you better hurry up and grab it. But in the handout, there's an account of this from the Wolfeboro Branch Railroad Club order board, and that gives you a pretty good idea of what all the details that happened. Now they still had to run freight, so they rigged up kind of an interesting setup here for the headlight. They used the headlight from the plow. It doesn't really show up too well, but the handrails are gone. There's two guys sitting on the end of the engine. Just one of those things that make a FRA inspector faint, probably. Now this was my first encounter with the Wolfeboro Central Division. My friend Eric Hartz and we found a really nice day and we chased them. It was end of March 1976. What I didn't know at that time is I'd be working there in about another month. But things happen kind of quickly sometimes. So here they are arriving in Plymouth at the far end of the yard here. And there's the freight house, which is no longer there. And they ran around the car and put it on a siding, and they got another car, and then they headed for Concord. And we got them at Bridgewater, and that was one of my favorite shots of the day, this particular one. And we got them at Meredith. They had a little bit of switching at Meredith. And we got them at Laconia. Now, there's some other pictures in here mixed in that I didn't take, but kind of come into the equation here. There's Cecil Knight, kind of a time-honored tradition of sitting on the back of the caboose. This is one of Eric's pictures. This is just a little bit below the depot. Over where that boxcar is, that was probably a carload of sand or some other material for Laconia Malleable Iron, which was in the old Laconia Car Company shops. Now we got down to Winnisquam. Now Winnisquam used to be an overhead bridge. They took that down a few years earlier and put in a grade crossing. But there hadn't been very much traffic over the rails in that area, so people weren't too alert to trains coming. So the lights come on and they're blowing the horn, and that Blue Seal feed truck is coming down, and he's moving pretty fast. But you'll notice there's some dark lines right there, and he locked them up, and that was pretty good. And he stopped in time, and they just kept right on coming. And at Canterbury, after we left Concord, when we got to Canterbury, Jimmy Moore said to Eric and I, he says, "You guys want to ride to Concord?" Well, sure. So we did. And I got this shot coming out of Concord. That's the Merrimack River Bridge. And we got back in my car at Canterbury, and away we went. Now this is Tilton. You know, the McDonald's is right there, and the Burger King, and all that development where the Pike's Runway is. You'd hardly even know it was the same place to look at it now. But that's what it looked like in 1976. So Eric sent me a bunch of pictures to include in my presentation. This is one of them. They were switching at Lakeport, had a carload of paper for the Laconia Evening Citizen newspaper. And so Eric decided to get a picture of me and my car and my dog. He got a little bit of everything in this picture. Well, then Jimmy and conductor, they decided, well, this might be a good day to break open the Lakeshore branch. So they headed out the Lakeshore branch and got as far as the Laconia Waterworks, and they've been plowing snow and piling it right on the track all winter long. So they came out with a bucket loader and cleaned things up for us and got a few pictures, and by this time they got everything pretty well out of the way, and away they went. This is the first time anything had been out this branch in years. It had been many years since anything had been out there. And we pulled into a gas station that overlooked all this, and we're waiting for the engine to come, and the gas station attendant said, "Can I help you guys?" And I said, "Well, we're just waiting for a train." He says, "What train? They don't run trains here." I said, "They will today." I said, "You just keep watching around that corner," and sure enough, here they come, kind of slow, and he looked quite amazed. And there we are going away. They're going away, and as you can see, there's a good reason why they weren't going very fast. So we get up towards Union Avenue. McDonald's is across the street. Burger King is to the left, and there's Eric. He's running to get ahead of him. Didn't have to run, didn't really need to run at all because they weren't going much further. So they broke for lunch, and there we are sitting inside a Burger King, and got a picture of the engine sitting there. Never went out there very much, so any pictures on that Lakeshore branch are kind of scarce. So anyways, Don Halleck is looking for any way that he can make a few dollars on this piece of railroad. So he started running excursions in the spring. It was in April. And it was just before I started working there, before they offered me a job, because I actually bought a ticket and rode Concord to Lincoln. And if I'd known I was going to be working there so soon, I probably wouldn't have bothered. So I got to save your money, or the thrifty Yankees that we are. But anyways, here they are in Concord. This is the first run. And I think that might be Dick Mauser's van right there, but I'm not sure. Looks like it. And this is on Northfield Hill. This is the ruling grade on the railroad. This was relocated in the early 1960s when Route 93 was built. There were several highway relocations, and that was one of the steepest grade. The grade used to go around and kind of meander through the woods. And when they did this, they just straightened it out and went right over the hill. And here we are back at Winnisquam. The rain must have come and washed away the skid marks in the road. And at Laconia. And this is between Lower Messer Street and Upper Messer Street crossings in Laconia. And looking across Paugus Bay at the engine house, if you notice, right above the first car is some brickwork, and that was the old engine house that the B&M had. By this time, it was down to just one stall, and it was being used by a concrete company. And it's since burned down, gone, leveled. And I think in that whole area, pretty much there's boat storage buildings and that little aluminum covered engine house. And here we are at Weirs Beach, and there's a news photographer taking movies. I think this is pre-video time from the front, and they're going to use it on news somewhere, not sure where. And this is a Gary Webster shot at Ashland. Now they ran these spring excursions in April and in May, and I've got some from the earlier ones, I've got some from the later ones. They're all mixed in, but I tried to do them in milepost order. So if it seems like the weather has changed or the snow has come and gone, it's just because I'm trying to make it a little easier. And some of these don't have dates on them, so I can't really do them by date. This is one of the other highway relocations. This is just a little bit north of Ashland. It's all parallel jointed rail, sometimes known as snap track. Looks like Atlas HO track, just a little bit bigger. And when they lay it, it's fine, and everything works pretty good. But as you run over it, the joints get lower, and they're running parallel. So instead of going side to side like you would with staggered rails, you go up and down. So one night we're coming out of Plymouth. Dave King was engineer, and we had an empty 40-foot B&M boxcar in the caboose in the 101. And he says, pretty nice piece of track. Let's see what this thing will do. So he yards the throttle open to run 8, and that thing would accelerate at a tremendous rate. And pretty soon we're flying on this parallel joints, and the engine is going about as far as it can on the spring travel on the trucks, up and down, up and down, up and down. And finally he says, I think we better slow down, get the high bridges coming. So I said, how fast were we going? He says, 49. That was quick. And afterwards, we told Jimmy about it, and he says, you guys doing that, he says, you pounded all the joints down. He says, so now all the joints are low in that stretch. Oh, well. But here we are at Bridgewater again. The water is up a little bit, spring thaw. And they did a photo run by at Livermore Falls. Why they picked Livermore Falls, I'm not sure, because you really can't get the train and the gorge in the same picture very easily unless you're on the opposite bank, when you can't get there from here. But they pulled up and let anybody off that wanted to take pictures, then backed back down through and come up. So here's what they're doing. And over here, in this area, there was a spur for the mill, and the mill was over in here. You look at it now, you'd think there wasn't enough room for all that activity, but I assure you, there was. And the fellow in the very stylish sport coat there, that's George King. And George King worked on the Wolfeboro Railroad on the Eastern Division, but he was also a very well-known trolley enthusiast here in New England. And he knew more about trolleys than probably most anybody. but I'm not sure about the coat. It's bright, you know, it's like high visibility, I guess. And another shot from Gary Webster. Somewhere's probably approaching Woodstock for a guess. And here we are up in Lincoln, in the yard. Managed to get a lot of interesting stuff in this shot. Got the harp switch stand. Notice the switch is well oiled. They're getting ready. They're getting ready to switch and to run this mill. So there we are, and next to the Lincoln station. And what they do is when we arrive there and give people enough time to cross the street, go over to the store, get something to eat or drink, and you know, after half an hour, 45 minutes, head back south again. But they did it upright, even had the white flags and everything. This was one of Eric's shots. He said this is one of his favorite shots, using a telephoto lens, and you got the mountain in the background, and he's right, it really is a great shot. And I think Donald Robinson was standing right next to us, taking basically the same shot. So we all had good taste. And this is in Campton, just below where the depot was. They're crossing underneath Route 93, and this was back in the days when there wasn't much traffic on Route 93, especially on a Sunday, and you could just stop on the road and pull over, take a picture, and then nobody bothered you. I don't know if I'd want to try that nowadays, but we did it several times that day. And just above Livermore Falls, they crossed the Pemigewasset, and you can see the water's running pretty good, probably similar to what it's doing right now. Now this is another one of Eric's shots. Now there's a lot going on in this picture. If you look kind of closely, on the right you see a young couple watching the train go by. And if you look on top of the boxcar, you notice there's people on top of the boxcar. Now, never could quite figure out how they got there, because there's no roof walks, there's no ladders. So either they were like human spiders and crawled up the side of the cars, or they jumped on when they were going underneath a bridge. Pretty risky type of stuff anyways. But if you look closely at the engine, you can see Dave King tossing a note wrapped around a spike to somebody to call the police and have the police meet us in Plymouth, which the person that he tossed it to, they did that, and the cops came. I don't know how they get the people off the cars, but they did. And this is at the north end of Plymouth, paralleling Main Street. And this is at Ashland, just approaching the freight house and the depot. This is southbound. And this is at Winona, that little underpass there that Brian Woodard, otherwise known as Woody, that worked on this line, used to call it the subterranean invitation to suicide. And the reason Woody gave it that name is Woody was working for a construction company, and he was using a road grader to scrape ice on that road, and he got the road grader stuck in there. He couldn't go forward, he couldn't go backwards, he was stuck. So then it became the subterranean invitation to suicide. I believe this was the same day that they had the hitchhikers on top of the roof there. This is another Eric Hatz shot. This is at Northfield. Now if you look, you can see the remains of the coal trestle that had been there for many years, and there have been some attempts at burning it, and they caught it in time 2 or 3 times. The last time they did not. And when it went, you can imagine how dry that is, full of coal dust and stuff. So by this time I was working for the railroad, And we were up in the engine house at Lakeport, and we got a phone call from dispatch saying that that was on fire. If you have any trains in the area, have them stop. So train was all put away, no problem there. Well, my former in-laws lived right near that coal trestle. And when my mother-in-law looked out the window, all she could see was flames, big flames, and smoke and debris. So her husband had a shoe store over in Franklin. She calls him up and said, "Leo, there's a fire." And then she hung up. She didn't tell him where the fire was. He didn't know. So he very quickly locked the doors of the store, got in his car, and headed for home. Well, it was pretty hard to get home because most of the roads were closed, and he found a back way to get to the house, and then he realized it wasn't his house that was on fire, it was the coal shed. By this time, the coal shed was pretty well consumed. So there we are at the engine house, and I think it was Woody said to me, "On your way home, could you just kind of take a look and see if there's any debris on the track?" So I did. There was one piece of charred 2x4 on the passing siding, and that was it. Most everything was just consumed. Big chunks of embers all over the place. So it was a pretty intense fire. And this is at Sargent Street. And late afternoon, nice sun. And coming into Concord, Route 93 is on the other side of this bridge. And you can see it's a mixed train. And, the Wolfeboro, if they're running that train, you might as well haul some freight or get rid of some empties or do something to make it somewhat productive. So this was that first run. And Eric and I caught them. They're just coming in by Concord Lumber. And even got the Wolfeboro on the coach, which wasn't going to stay there much longer. And that's the switch stand for the switch into Concord Lumber. And you notice the film crew is up on the front of the engine again. Now this was probably taken maybe a little bit later. This may have been the returning back to Lakeport after the last springtime excursion. This is at Fan Road, and Concord Lumber is in behind the train, and that's all changed. It's all buildings in there now. I think Delta Dental is in there, all kinds of stuff. But the bucolic little railroad still runs through there, but everything's kind of built up. Now there were 2 Army surplus 44-tonners that were available, and the state of New Hampshire was able to get them, and they shipped them to us. And one of them showed up. The other one got sidelined. It got damaged en route, so it came a little later. So we got word that this was coming. Well, a lot of the guys wanted to work the train that night, so I didn't work that night. So I got in my car with my camera and I said, "I'm going to take pictures." So I did, because I love 44-tonners. Anybody that knows me knows that that's my favorite engine. So I'm taking pictures, and pretty soon the train comes down. The crew gets off, and they're looking the engine over. Billy Remington was in there, and Dave King. I'm not sure who the conductor was. So they get ready to bring the rest of the train down to the siding for the interchange. They said, "Come on, Billy, let's get down and get rid of these cars." Billy said, I'm gonna stay with the engine." So Billy stayed with the engine. The crew went, got rid of the cars, went down, got something to eat. And Billy just stayed right with that 44-tonner, because the idea at the time was to use the 44-tonner on the passenger train between Laconia and Meredith. And so he was figuring that was going to be his engine, and he wanted to make sure he knew that engine inside and out. It didn't quite work that way, but it was a good try anyways. So there they are. They got the train made up. There's the caboose from when they dropped the rest of the train. They're doing a brake test, and they'll be ready to go momentarily. Well, leaving Concord, this is by the bypass road, right just north of the cement plant that was there. It was getting pretty dark. I got this one last shot at Tilton as they're crossing Main Street, and I'm down about a quarter of a second for shutter speed, and I said, this is about time to go home. So that was the end of that one. So then the B&M came to Concord with their bicentennial train, the 200 and a couple of display cars and a caboose. So we came down to Concord that day. The agent, we always had to call the agent, tell him we're coming, and he'd tell us where the cars were. So we said, well, bring your engine and your caboose down. Gloria Stone would like to see your engine in the caboose. So we said, okay. So we came right down and we stopped right behind them on the main line. So we walked through the engine, looking things over, looking through the displays there, and there was a engineer, B&M engineer, explaining about the engine. He's telling me all about the engine, like I really need to know much about it. And I said, well, that's okay. I said, I'm with the Wolfeboro Railroad. I said, we're right behind you. And he said, what do you mean? I said, look out your window. And he did. He said, you're not supposed to be on this track. It's out of service. So we never got a bulletin order on it. So he was a little huffy about the whole thing, and Jimmy kind of put him in his place pretty quickly. And that was that. Now Eric got a shot at the Ashland High Bridge. This is some of the paper mill buildings. By this time the paper mill was shut down, all the equipment was gone, and everything's going to rack and ruin. But it was still a pretty photogenic location. And this was taken from one of the excursion trains, I think in the spring. The mill, some of the mill buildings there at Ashland. Now this is in the summertime, and up in Lincoln. Gives you an idea of the size difference between the two engines, kind of like Mutt and Jeff, Laurel and Hardy, any of those things. But there's actually, a little bit of traffic there, and the emphasis was on little. The traffic never materialized to what it was supposed to. It never even came close. And then when the mill shut down for good, that really spelled the end of the Central Division. Poor Don Halleck, the ledger was hemorrhaging red ink. Now, earlier, we had Dane Malcolm's pictures of hitting the power company trucks up there in Thornton. Well, one day, we were having some trouble around Belmont by a campground. There were kids throwing rocks at the train, and that just infuriated Dave King, so he'd just lay on the horn going past this campground, which made more rocks come out. It wasn't a good thing. So one day I'm up on the front of the engine, and I see this dent in the metal there, and I said, I think we've been shot at. Look at that. It's right near my window. So called the office, and Don Halleck called the police, and so I think they even maybe got the FBI involved in this. So Jimmy had been away for a few days. He came back, and we said, look at this, Jim. Somebody shot at us. And Jim said, you bunch of dopes. That's from the wreck there with the power company trucks. Oh. So we had a good laugh about it. So I put a little bit of red paint on there and a Band-Aid, because the engine had a little boo-boo there. So there we are, laughing about it. I took a picture. In come the police. And we said, this is a mistake. This had happened several months earlier. They said, well, can we take a look at it? And I said to Billy Remington, I said, Billy, why don't you move some of the stuff that's in the way so these gentlemen can take a look at the engine? And Billy just kind of looked at me, and I said, go take and make sure they can get up there and see everything okay. He got the hint. He took a rag, wiped away the still wet red paint, and took away the Band-Aid, and they looked and they said, "Yep, that looks good to us. See ya." So I dodged a bullet on that one, me and my sense of humor, but I couldn't resist. Now this is out here at Bridge Street in Plymouth, and we used to stop here. You know, the crossing lights didn't work, so we didn't have to worry about keeping the lights going. So we'd stop there and go to the little store, get something to drink, maybe something to eat. So there's an interesting bunch of people here. You got Dave King up on the engine, heading into the cab. You got Wayne Wheeler, who was a rail fan and volunteer, in the yellow shirt. You got Brian Woodard in the stand between the rails. You got Billy Remington sitting on the battery box over there. But that was a pretty good cross-section of the employees we had. Now, this is something Frank Judge always likes. This is the branch line special. And this was a fundraiser for the Wolfeboro Branch Railroad Club. And we would give you a ride. We'd do 3 branch lines for $5. So what they did was we loaded people on at Lakeport at the depot, and we shoved the cars down the Lakeshore branch and had a meal stop at McDonald's. And there's one of the tickets. And there's the crowd. I think I'm standing by the switch stand with the blue shirt. This is a Gary Webster shot. But it was a pretty good crowd. I think they sold out the train. You know, $5 a person. That wasn't too bad of a price back then. And there we are at McDonald's. But I didn't know at that time that when a bus tour comes to McDonald's, the driver gets a complimentary meal. And we didn't know that. Because if we'd known that, I think the whole train crew would have marched right in there and said, "We'd like our complimentary meal." Oh well. But it was a fun night. And when we shoved out the Lakeshore branch, there was one really bad low joint, and I'm standing there watching us as we went over it, and somebody leaned out the window and said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "I'm watching to see if we're going to derail." Closed the window and figured they didn't really want to see a derailment up close. It was a beautiful night. Now the other thing that happened that particular day is I dropped my wife off at her parents' house because it looked like she was going to have our child at most any moment. It was kind of close, so her and the dog are there in Northfield, and I'm working the train. So I came back after the end of the train to pick her up, and my father-in-law greeted me at the door and said, "Your wife's in labor, and the dog is up the veterinary clinic." The dog had run out to the street and ran into the side of a car and broke her nose. So it was a lively day. My son was born the next morning at about 10 a.m. And here's another shot of the gang. Jimmy Moore in the red shirt, Dave King standing behind him, and Billy Remington heading towards the engine. Now this is the only shot I've ever seen taken on the Franklin Tilton branch from that night. And I got this off the internet, so whoever took it, thank you. And we were supposed to have gone on the Belmont branch, or what was almost Belmont branch, but it was getting late, it was getting dark. Don Halleck said, "Let's just skip that and just highball for Lakeport." So we did. But this is a shot a little later in the summer. I think it was a Gary Webster shot, and this is at what we call 3B North, coming up on 3B North crossing in Northfield. And this is 3B South. And if the train was moving, it could be very hard to catch a train at both crossings. You had to really move because the road was a lot longer than the railroad. Now, one of the reasons why the state wanted to buy this piece of track, besides revitalizing the mill, and was for a sewer project they were going to put in from Meredith to Franklin, and it ran parallel to the tracks most all the way down. So, and we're going to take a little break. Everybody can stand up, stretch their legs, get something to drink, maybe get a cookie, and there's one of these little brochures left if you want it. First come, first served. So be a little break and we'll be right back. Okay, as I was saying, the state had a double motive for buying this line to get that sewer project going. They never could come to any kind of an agreement with the state as far as what they were going to pay for it. So this way, the state killed two birds with one stone, shall we say. Now, one of the customers in Laconia was the Allen Rogers Company. They made wood turnings, wood products, and they were in the old Laconia Car Company shops. I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you. But we only went in to switch Allen Rogers probably 2 or 3 times in the time that I worked there. But here's one of the times. Eric Hartz took this picture. Now Eric is what I've always considered one of the luckiest people I've ever known. When he shows up, interesting things happen, and he gets interesting pictures. And you'll see some really interesting ones in a few minutes here. But you can see how sharp the curve is going in here. That's Jimmy Moore kind of watching to make sure everything stays together. Now, most of you probably don't realize that the Wolfeboro Railroad Central Division played a role in a major motion picture. Now, it wasn't a very big role, but it was a big picture. It was The Exorcist 2. Now, they needed some footage of sunlight glinting off of steel rails for a scene where Linda Blair was going to be in a metro liner with the priest, and in the window behind them they needed shiny rails. So the Wolfeboro Railroad said, we can help you with that. So a film crew from a contractor came up, and they built this assembly on the end of the passenger car. You can see it's almost like an erector set. All these pieces of steel. There's Dave King, there's myself watching, and there's a guy from the film company. And we're right on top of the switch for Quinn T at Tilton. And what they did was they built this platform, and there's the base for the camera right there. And they're putting the finishing touches on this erector set thing. And the guy's putting the camera on there. So what they would do is they would start the camera running, and we would shove down at about 20, 25 miles an hour, and he's focusing on the rails, trying to get the sunlight glinting off him. It's in the afternoon. I think it was in July that it happened. Kind of a precarious perch, but it didn't seem to bother this guy any. But Eric Hartz, the luckiest guy around, just happened to be there that day. He's the only one who took pictures. So last week I said, hey Eric, could you help me out on this? I said, this will be a really good story. The Wolfeboro's contribution to The Exorcist. So he said, I'll send you some pictures, and he did. Now, I also want to mention that the film crew brought a woman with this huge, I can't call it a picnic basket, it's more like a big hamper full of food, really good delicatessen food. And she would stand there and slap together sandwiches for us and just say, have some more, eat some more. This is really good stuff. Have some more. Oh, boy, did we ever. I mean, we really ate like kings that day. And Eric climbed up on the signal mast to get an overview. And, you know, Pike's, whoop. Pike's Airport would be right along in here. So with the trees all cleared right there, it gave a pretty good line of sight for the sun to come in, for them to get the nice clear footage, no trees in the way. Really worked pretty good for them. That gives you an idea what the setup looked like. And there they are, they're moving, and the film is rolling, and it worked pretty good, but when they got back to New York and developed the film, it still wasn't quite exactly what they wanted, so they came back a second time and did this all over again. Now, the other thing that the Wolfeboro did was they ran excursions for the summer between Laconia and Meredith. I think it was 3 round trips a day. And they fixed up the coaches, they painted them, and lettered one up Pemigewasset Valley, the other one Concord and Montreal. And I made the suggestion, and Peter D. Hayes, which was running the whole thing, said, I like that idea, that's a good idea. Pay homage to the predecessor railroads. So we did that, but the interesting thing was that there have been some rail fans have bought photos of the Pemigewasset Valley car and the Concord and Montreal, thinking that they were vintage, and they weren't. I won't mention any names, but we've tricked a few. But anyways, this train ran for a couple of months, and one day somebody came in and asked one of the crew members, where's that nice Mr. Hayes? Because Peter used to work on the Eastern Division on the other side of the lake. And this was over in Wolfeboro. And the person said, oh, he's over in Meredith running a turkey farm. So this became known as the turkey. So anytime we talk about this excursion, it's the turkey. And I'm sure Dick Mauser remembers it well. Now they also did rentals. You could charter a train. So the scouts, I was Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts, chartered a train from Laconia down to Tilton and back. So they scheduled it to run in the morning and then have it finish up so that they'd be ready for the first run of the turkey. Well, as all things go on the railroad, any of the railroaders know, no matter how much time you think something's going to take, how much time you allot for something, it always takes more, sometimes a lot more. So they got the scouts on board, and they headed for Tilton, and were running late. So the scouts had a pretty quick ride to Tilton, ran around the train, and then got back up there so the turkey wouldn't be too late. I think I got this picture from Colin, I believe. There's very, very few pictures of this particular run. And here we are, they're coming back right near the crossing that goes into Quintee. And along in Belmont, right along the lake, as you can see, some of the excavation for the sewer project has gone on right in here. Now the turkey ran until Labor Day weekend. Monday of Labor Day weekend was the last run of the turkey. And I believe this is from that day. This is at Meredith. The Meredith Depot was right on the other side of that passenger car. And here we have the crew, there's Arthur Pinkham and Ray Welch. Ray was the conductor. I was brakeman. And I think Billy Remington's in the cab. And this is at the, they're on the platform of where the Meredith station used to be. Now this will give you an idea what things look like probably circa 1949, 1950 at Meredith. And I picked up this negative on eBay. The seller didn't know where it was, but I knew where it was. Knowledge is power. Now this is at Laconia. There again, that last day of the turkey. Weirs Beach, the last day of the turkey. And doing a runaround at Laconia to get on the other end of the cars. And we get Billy Remington, engineer, and Wayne Ford was the brakeman. And luckily for cameras with self-timers, which mine had, I could set up a tripod and get the whole crew at once. Got Wayne Ford, got Ray Welch, and myself, and Billy Remington. This was the last day of the turkey. A kind of a bucolic summer's day, looking across Paugus Bay. Engines over on the Lakeshore branch, and I think I'm standing right by the engine house. Now the 44 tonners, they got them going and painted them up. I think this was the first one that came in, all painted up, going past the waterworks on the Lakeshore branch. You notice there's no snow in this picture like there was in the earlier one. And these are Gary Webster shots, these three of them. Shot right there, coming out onto the main line with a propane car. And going out through the Irwin Marine. Always kind of a touch and go situation, cars, boats, whatever, packed too close sometimes. Now in the fall, ran excursions from Concord to Lincoln, round trip. And they were pretty ambitious as far as scheduling goes. They started way before the leaves turned. I think the first trip was like the first week in September. Everything's still nice and green. Don Halleck comes over to the engine house and he says, "We've only sold about 5 tickets." And he said, "We don't quite know what to do. We really have to run the train because we sold tickets, but we're going to have the news media there, and we really need to have some warm bodies to fill the train. If you know anybody that might want to go for a ride for free, tell them to get on the train on Saturday." He said, "And don't tell the paying customers that you're riding for free, because they'll want their money back, and we really need the money." So we spread the word, and I told as many people as I could. And Woody, bless his heart, he let everybody in Meredith know, "Hey, free train ride." We had quite a crowd at Meredith get on, and everything looked really good for the media, and Uncle Donald was saved. But this is Woody, and any of you that knew Woody knew he was quite a character. And this is actually a pretty good portrait of Woody. He looks pretty civilized. He looks like maybe he just got a haircut. But he was quite a character, and he pretty darn good engineer, pretty good railroader. And any of you that got the handouts, there's some of his press releases in there. Now, Woody was the freight agent there at Lakeport, and he had a lot of spare time. The phone didn't ring very often, but he'd fire up the typewriter and he'd do these press releases of the various things that happened on the railroad, and it was wonderful. What a wonderful sense of humor he had. Now this is up in Lincoln. You see all the foliage is starting to change. Finally, those green leaves turn color. Now, for some reason, they got up to Lincoln with the 44-tonner and a coach. I'm not sure what the reason was. As much as I love 44-tonners, that one was not very reliable. It was always breaking down, and to put it on a passenger train would seem, well, maybe not the best deal to do, but somebody did it, and somebody got a picture of it. Now, we also had to plow snow in the wintertime, so there's Woody in his snowmobile suit, and then we're going to get ready to plow snow. Pushing the snow plow. Now, we had no radios. Everything's all hand signals. So Woody would stick his head out the window and half of his face would be frozen. But that's okay, because we had heat in the plow, and we had a woman that would cook for us. And
Got a picture of my girlfriend at the time there. That's Linda in that picture. I don't know if this is the trip, but that was my girlfriend at the time. She went for a ride with us. But I've got a little story. If this wasn't the day, no, it wouldn't have been, because it was the Goodwin Railroad at that point. And I think I was the last person to ever plow snow with that combination right there. We were up on the Ashland High grade fill there, and I don't know if it was Woody running. I think it might have been Jimmy Moore, because I remember we were going along pretty good. And on the top of the grade, about halfway down, the plow derailed, and I was up in the cupola running the plow, running the flanger. And talk about a little pucker factor. We had it tipped over just about as much as in that previous wreck with this plow. And it was leaning right over. And it was late in the day. So we decided to go back to the engine house and tackle it in the morning. And I think Woody called up Herbie Goodwin and told him that we had the plow derailed and we were going to tackle it in the morning. And I could hear him on the other end saying, "You get your butts back up there and get that plow back on tonight, because I don't want to see a picture of that plow on the front page of the Manchester Union Leader tomorrow." So you better get that thing back on the track. So we worked all night digging that thing out and dragging it back to Lakeport. And it never appeared on the front page of the Union Leader.
good thing. But plowing is kind of an act of faith, because when you're looking out, you don't see any rails, and you have faith that they're still there. So there's always kind of a uneasy thing. I think Dickie and I were up in that cupola quite a bit, raising the flanger up and down.
Snow is flying everywhere.
Oh yeah.
The visibility is about zero, so it's really an act of faith. That's the only facts.
But this is what Weirs Beach looks like with a fresh coating of snow and no tourists. And you know, there again, it's that act of faith that there's actually rails there. But I think this was the day that Don Halleck showed up in his car, and he motioned for us to stop, and he says, "Now hurry right along, boys. Let's get this cleaned up and get this done." He said, "I don't want any overtime." You were there that day, Dickie. You, me, and Woody. You, me, and Woody ran that whole thing for a short time. Now we've got the 101 fired up and ready to leave the engine house. Maybe it's you running it, Dickie. I can't tell who's in there, but looks like Woody down there on the step. So somebody's got to run it, because I'm running the camera. But this is down at the south end of Laconia, and the wind had drifted up the snow pretty good. And we had to make several passes to finally get through it, and we made it. But that was the end of the railroad. This is my last paycheck, and that's the end of today's show. Thank you all for coming, and I hope I entertained you. I hope that I gave you some really good information about the Wolfeboro Railroad Central Division It was really fun. Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for inviting me. Anybody got a question? Put your hand up. Well, I'll start over here.
Yeah, the Lakeport branch? What were the customers on the Lakeport branch? I saw our LP.
Yeah. On the Lakeshore branch, the customers on that branch, in the Wolfeboro days, the only customer we had was Pyrofax Gas. In the Goodwin Railroad days and New England Southern days, there was some lumber out there for Grossman's. But that was towards the very end. So.
Thanks.
Frank.
Is it true that every piece of equipment we saw in your presentation, except for maybe that second 44-tonner, it still exists?
To the best of my knowledge, everything still exists, including that second 44-tonner. The second 44-tonner wound up, the last I knew, it was up at Conway Scenic. It led it up to New Hampshire Central.
Oh, 15?
No, 15's gone. But the one that's up there now, painted yellow, led it up New Hampshire Central, is the second state-owned one. Yep.
I'm a model railroader. I'm wondering if those steel passenger cars had any numbers. If anybody remembers that.
I don't remember them having numbers. We just referred to them by name. They'd had numbers previously. I think they used the Jersey Central numbers for them when they were on the Eastern Division. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Had to be about 1977. Our son was born in 76 and he was still an infant. And we rode a big green car down from Sanbornville to Wolfeboro. Was that part of your railroad? Passenger car with a motor in the front?
That was on the Wolfeboro Railroad Eastern Division.
So it wasn't your railroad?
It wasn't on this railroad, no, on the other side of the lake.
Okay.
Yep. Now, I know the car you mean. That was the old Lancaster, Oxford, and Southern car.
Thank you.
Interesting piece of equipment.
All about the pile driver, and somebody asked, what do you do with the pile driver? You want to tell them that story?
What's that?
The pile driver, you want to tell them what's,
Well,
somebody asked about?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, talking about east and west side of the lakes, the central division versus the eastern division of Wolfeboro. There was a pile driver, former central Vermont, that was sitting in Tilton, or Northfield at the Tilton Freight House. And it was hauled up to Lakeport, and eventually the tender was put behind the 250 to replace a tender, if you will. But somebody asked the question of one of the railroaders, what are you doing with a pile driver? And I think it might have been King, that said, well, we're building a pile trestle to connect the two divisions together. So I walked away thinking that was going to be quite the thing.
Right across, right beside you.
I never heard that one before.
I got a couple of people have asked, and myself, I'm curious, the accident up at the Jack-o'-lantern, how fast, you didn't see the bucket loader truck? How fast were you going?
I don't know how fast they were going, but it was probably 20, 25 miles per hour. But that was before I was there. And I'm really glad I missed it. The only one that might give us any kind of insight for speed might have been Dane.
Well, he said it was humming.
What's that?
He said it was humming along.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Any other questions?
Someone asked where the 557 is now, and you can tell them
It's the Danbury.
Danbury.
or Naugatuck Railroad.
At the last time I heard it was the Danbury Railroad Museum.
That's at the Naugatuck Railroad.
Maybe.
Yeah, the 557, which was the 101, wound up in Connecticut. We think it's on the Naugatuck, but we're not 100% sure. But it's still around anyways. That's the good news. Anybody else?
Behind you, Mr. Davison.
Oh,
Two questions to you. I noticed you weren't flying white flags all the time. Why was that?
Well, we really didn't need white flags. And when we had them, it was just more for decoration. Everything runs as an extra nowadays.
I remember one time back in the engine house, I cleaned both white flags off back in the engine house.
Yep.
Embarrassing moment.
That would do it. Yeah.
Second part, if you ever backed out in the hole in Ashland to the paper mill, that you'd slide down on a slippery day.
Yeah. Well, when we were running the Wolfeboro Central Division, the Ashland paper mill was already gone. Already. So they had the switch spiked out of service.
Okay.
But we did go in there with a yellow Peril one time, the high rail truck.
Okay.
But that was it. But I've heard some stories about that.
You could slide if you have a sheet of ice on it, or a wet rainy day, you crept down.
Leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Slippery place, that Ashland paper mill. Any more questions?
Bruce, did you ever cash that check?
The question is, did I ever cash that check? Yes, you better believe I did. And I was lucky I didn't have to dribble it all the way to the bank either.
Back in the day, when Don Halleck ran the passenger service from Wolfeboro to Sandmanville, my kids were young, and we would go on it quite a lot. He would be the conductor oftentimes.
Yeah.
And it was quite an interesting run. But do you recall when they ceased operations on the Wolfeboro to Sandmanville run? I don't remember on that.
It was 1980, yeah.
Yes, the Wolfeboro Eastern Division probably ended around 1980 or so. By that time, I was long gone out of there. You know, my end with the Wolfeboro Railroad was right there on the screen. That was my last connection with them. Yep. And you know, by the time we got done, there were not many people left.
Yeah.
The money
on that run.
Yeah, the money was really hemorrhaging.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, thank you very much.
I think we're all set.
Very interesting.
Good. Glad you enjoyed it.
Well done.
Thank you.